So this session is in practice, working with children learning outside of school. So I'm going to introduce the speakers and then hand over to them to get underway. So first up we have Nicky McIntosh, who is a freelance museum consultant. And I'm really delighted to say that Jem has been working with Nicky in the dissemination stage of the project that she's going to be talking about. So a huge thank you to Nicky. We then have Lisa Ford, who's Head of Learning and Engagement at the Herbert Art Gallery and Museum, Coventry Transport Museum and Lunt Roman Fort. We've then got Jenny Wilkie in the middle there, who's the Creative Learning Support Officer with Tees Valley Museums. And finally, we have Rob Bennett from Be Curious Training and Consultancy Services. So I'll hand over to Nicky.
Thank you. I'll just take this out of my ear. So just to start with some background about my work with children learning outside of school. As a museum consultant, I became focused on home education following lived experience as a parent to two autistic children who've both experienced barriers to attendance at school. Through seeking peer support, I became really aware that this is an increasingly common experience, and it's also fueling rising numbers of families who are home educating. Thanks to developing a creative practice grant funded by Arts Council, I was able to carry out research to see what's already happening in museums with and for these audiences, and also to speak to home educating families to find out what they want and what they need from museums to support their learning. I've developed this into a toolkit with Jem to encourage museums to be inclusive of children learning outside of school, and I'm really happy to introduce the toolkit today along with two really inspiring case studies of this work in practice. So this is the toolkit. It's available now to download from the Jem website, hot off the press, and it highlights ways that we can reach out to home educating families and children with barriers to school attendance. So in the toolkit, we've got ideas that can be used across all types and sizes of museums, as well as advocacy data and some case studies, providing the ethical and the business case for giving time and resource to this audience. We've also got some troubleshooting and some planning tools to get you started. So I want to give you just a quick insight into this audience. I'll run through the different types of education outside of the formal school system. I don't have time to go into detail, but I'll do my best to summarise. So some families choose to home educate their children as a preferred approach, and it's known as elective home education. Sometimes families feel that they actually have no other option because their children are not being served well by schools. And where children have moved from being on a school role to being home educated, there may well be trauma due to the difficulties that they faced. As well as mental health challenges, within home educated communities, there's a high proportion of children with special educational needs and disabilities. In England, the numbers home educating are rising all the time. So in 2021-22 academic year, just over 116,000 families were home educating, and that rose to 153,000 in the academic year 23-24. Flexi-schooling is an agreed long-term arrangement where a child attends school for a fixed number of days and then is home educated on the remaining days. Local authorities can also provide alternative provision for some children who can't access school, and this would include pupil referral units, PRUs, and hospital schools. There's also education other than at school, which is also funded by local authorities for children where no school placement would meet their needs and they have a bespoke package of learning. As well as these established pathways, an estimated 1.5 million children are currently struggling to attend school, and the barriers to attending school are many and complex, and often these children are experiencing extreme anxiety, and it has been called emotionally based school avoidance, or EBSA. In the 23-24 academic year, combined with school exclusions, unauthorised absences totalled around 32 million days, and it's a staggering 72% higher than in 2018-19, which was the last full year before the pandemic. And authorised absences would be in addition to this. So absence for mental health or physical health should be an authorised absence. So those absences are in addition to that. And again, these figures include a disproportionate number of disadvantaged children and children with SEND. So you can find out more about these different strands of the community within the toolkit. And I know that the next presentation, they're looking at some really excellent work, specifically with this group. So I love this quote from Dr. Naomi Fisher, who's a clinical psychologist, and she's published a lot and spoken a lot about school attendance issues. It doesn't have to be like this. We could put flourishing at the centre of children's lives. We could stop asking, how do we make this child go to school? And start asking, how do we help this child learn? We could put flexibility at the heart of the process, because learning comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You don't have to be in a classroom to learn. So, of course, museums can really help with this. As many of us experience every day, they're perfectly placed for flexible learning outside the classroom. So, how do museums do this most effectively for this audience? The research I did suggested what would be helpful. Firstly, it's really important to communicate our offers more effectively. Many families struggle to know what is already available, and it's also really important to think about the timings and the spaces we use, the booking mechanisms available, the pricing, and being able to accommodate a broad age range, because you're talking about a whole family. You can't please everyone, but we can be clear about what we can offer. You also need to think about our language. So categorising activity within school programming can give the wrong impression. And remember those who can't access school as well as those that are home educators. It's really positive that many home educated families already visit museums independently. The main drivers for their visits are for learning and enjoyment, and they value museums for their learning activities and resources and the access to collections and specialist knowledge that we offer. Their engagement, they've told me, could be increased by providing more activities and resources specifically for home educators, and they said particularly workshops, loaned resources and online resources. So the toolkits concludes some case studies that demonstrate a variety of approaches to this work. So I'm going to mention some of them briefly now. This is Compton Verney, in Warwickshire, where I ran 2 consultation days. We tested existing elements of their programming for schools and families with some home educators. There was a wealth of existing resource that was easily packaged into an offer, and take-up was good. The image shows one of the groups during a sculpture tour that would normally be just available for schools. The led sessions and the self-led resources we offered needed to be optional, flexible and relaxed. Crucially, we found that sessions that had been designed initially for schools needed to be delivered quite differently, and it was important to adjust our expectations about what success looks like. So facilitators need to be aware that families will have their own learning styles and ambitions for the visit, and it doesn't make their sessions any less meaningful. So there is a contrasting approach at New Forest Heritage Centre, where they've developed and piloted a new programme designed specifically for home educating families with children aged 6 to 11. It's based on 9 models about the history of the New Forest. And each model has semi-led activities at the museum and a booklet that they then take home to carry on their learning. They have 1 session a month for around 6 families at a time, and each session includes craft-based activities, creative writing and games or puzzles. They're creative, relaxed sessions catering for differing learning styles. The majority of the families that took part had children who had been in school but could no longer attend for a variety of reasons. Some had children both in and out of school, some were flexi-schooling, and for some home education is a temporary solution. Many of them include children with SEND, and all the activities were designed to be accessible. Their families can sign up to a mailing list to become part of their home educating hub, with the aim of connecting home educators together in a sociable space where peer support can take place. The team there are now working on extending the offer to older home learners due to requests from secondary age children and also to Key Stage 1 children. And interestingly, they've tested the sessions with school groups who have actually preferred this more relaxed approach. So, from small groups to large events. Annual takeover days are held at the Great North Museum, led by museum staff plus Newcastle University staff and some freelancers. Activity happens throughout the building, including a lunch space and a quiet room. They have a quiet hour with reduced numbers, lower noise levels and sensitive lighting. They're extremely popular, usually getting around 350 bookings, and they're free of charge for families to take part. To support home education further, Morgan Fail, who is the learning coordinator, has also initiated the North East Regional Education Network for cultural providers to come together and share their practice. So if you're in the North East, I'd really recommend that you try and join that. Alongside this, the Great North Museum also introduced a marketplace event for home educators, which enables families to browse stalls from cultural organisations and find out about opportunities available, workshops and resources around the region. Onto a programme with a mental health focus. Hampshire Cultural Trust project Stepping Stones began in early 24, and it focuses on work with young people who are either on the Hampshire CAMHS waiting list or not yet known to CAMHS. So the young people are usually self-referred onto the programme, either by their parents or through school. The programme included 2 projects specifically for young people who are being home educated or who are not currently attending school due to their emotional health and well-being. One programme was delivered online over 4 weeks, and the other was delivered in person at the Red House Museum in Christchurch over 10 weeks. Both of them were working with a professional artist and explored mindful creativity. And they are delivering more face-to-face programmes this year. Finally, looking at outreach, History, Forage and Feast is an outdoor foraging and history programme for home-educated young people run by the Community Engagement Outreach Team at Heritage Doncaster. They work in partnership with Yorkshire Wildlife Trust. It's been running for 4 years, and sessions are held every month at Potterick Carr Nature Reserve between April and December. So the young people explore historical artefacts and take part in related cooking and craft activities using materials and ingredients foraged from the landscape, and that's what you can see them doing here. The programme focuses on social outcomes and physical and mental well-being, and they planned this based on the 5 ways to well-being. The museum objects they use range from taxidermy to Egyptian archaeology, which is taken to the nature reserve and combined with fast-paced hands-on activities such as pumpkin carving and making toffee apples on a campfire. So that was a really flying visit to a few of the featured case studies in the toolkit, but now we're able to look in more detail at 2 of them, and I'm really delighted to hand over to Lisa and to Rob, who are going to tell us about their work at Coventry Transport Museum.
Right, so first I'm just going to check, can everybody hear that okay? Brilliant, okay. So thank you for having me here today. Thank you to Nicky for inviting me to be a part of this. I'm Lisa Ford and I'm Head of Learning and Engagement for Culture Coventry Trust, which is part of a bigger organisation called CV Life. Within our trust we oversee 3 museums, the Herbert Art Gallery and Coventry Transport Museum and the Lunt Roman Fort. So today we're going to focus on Coventry Transport Museum and our Home Educator programme. So I just thought I would give a bit of a context really about where it began and where it is now. So traditionally across the Herbert and also Coventry Transport Museum, we would respond to home education requests. So when home educator communities or parents would get in touch, we would offer them a schools workshop from our formal learning programme, and we would adapt it for them, but it was never quite suitable because it was a bit too rigid, it wasn't flexible enough. So then we turned to doing annual home ed days across the museums, which was, as Nicky mentioned, some of the places doing a takeover day for home educator families. And what we would include there was activities suitable for all different ages, from babies through to teenagers. And it would be a takeover of the museum, loads of staff thrown at it, a whole variety of things for people to drop into throughout the day. Some of it a bit more structured than others, but very, very informal and relaxed, and we know that that's what this audience needs. They do still run, we still do them as part of our annual programme, and we now include it at the Lunt Roman Fort as well. And what we found is that our home educator audiences, they do go from each annual day from one museum to the next, so we try to spread them out across the 3 museums throughout the year so that they happen at quite a nice varied distance from each other. So the annual days are great, and we really love them, and we love the home educator community completely taking over the museum, because everybody knows what to expect from our audiences to the staff in museums, and everybody shows support for each other. But we also wanted to progress on that because, again, as Nicky mentioned, home educators are saying they want more. They want more activity and more resource that is dedicated to them, not adapted for them. We've been really lucky at the Transport Museum that we did receive some funding last year from the Science Museum Group as part of a science capital project that they are delivering. It is a substantial pot of money for us. It's £15,000 in year 1 and repeated again in year 2. So it's a 2-year project. And when we were thinking about what we wanted to do with this project, we knew that home education was the thing that we wanted to focus on because of that consultation work with home educators that were coming through the museums already. And we knew that this was an opportunity to invest in a programme that was dedicated for them, but we were also thinking about the sustainability of it, because once the money is gone from the funding, we don't want it to just drop off, and we want it to continue. So we have been really lucky there, and we've used it to invest in staff time and staff training predominantly. Resources along the way as well, but long-term resources that will see the test of time and last for many years to come. But the biggest priority was the staff training, and that's where Rob will come in a moment, because we've been really lucky with the funding to work with Rob as an external consultant who's helped to advise us on our programming, upskill our staff, not just with knowledge but also with confidence and innovative ideas, but also to be there to consult with us about what this audience needs. Overall, we wanted the experience to be inclusive of all ages and for all families, no matter what that family looks like. What we now do is we offer 6-week courses at the Transport Museum, and again we do these 3 times a year. So once a week families have access to the museum. They take part in very focused workshops, but across 6 weeks the children who are participating build up knowledge, build up skills. They do really innovative things, which Rob will tell you more about in the moment, because he's been on the ground delivering it, whereas I'm just kind of behind the scenes a little bit and letting my wonderful team lead the way with the delivery of the programme. But over those 6 weeks, what's been really lovely is that we've got to know those families and those children more, and many of the children and the parents do have SEN needs. Neurodiversity is a really apparent thing within home education, and that is not just the children, it is the parents too, and it's important that both parents and children feel comfortable with the informal environment that we're providing for them. And that's one of the beautiful things about learning in museums. It's not a school. It is a more relaxed environment. It's a really creative and imaginative environment that encourages curious thinking, and that's what we're trying to harness through the programme. At the Transport Museum, it has got a STEM-based approach to it, so not meaning to teach people to suck eggs, but just in case you don't know what STEM is, that's science, technology, engineering and math. And again, this is where we've been lucky with the funding to bring in the expertise of Rob. So I'm going to invite Rob to join me up here. Rob can tell you a bit more about the programme delivery, what's been involved, and his reflections on working with home educators.
Thank you, Lisa. As an autistic adult and someone who was involved with home educating my own children, I know firsthand how difficult it can be. And through my experience, I see extraordinary things where people take places as the trust that has been put in my experience to develop resources for places that you are passionate about, inviting families in to engage with it, to learn from it, to be curious about it. And lo and behold, it builds their confidence, their employability skills, and I'm talking 7-year-olds here, not just grown-ups. And of course, how things are connected together. They're not static, dead, lifeless objects in a space. It's part of our lives, all of our lives, and it's all connected. And when I look at the young people and simply open up an opportunity for them to engage and take part and recognize that we all need that space and that permission to be ourselves, with a little bit of guidance and questioning, they do extraordinary things. And one of the biggest extraordinary things in the example of the 6-week program we ran in 2024, looking forward to 2025, by the way, is just one case study that I have to highlight to you of a young lad called Michael. And Michael was home educating. It was his first session with his mum as a home educator. He'd come out of school. He was traumatized by that experience with his own autism and mental health challenges. He didn't speak. He had become so inclusive. He even had a tent in his lounge to feel safe. After the 6-week program, he sent me a thank you card. He said, "Before I came, I felt worthless. Now I can do anything." Isn't that what we all want? Isn't that what we strive for? Isn't that where our passion is? I constantly try as a nearly 60-year-old to be 10, to be curious and fearless, like I'm trying to be right now, regardless of how my nerves might feel, because every day is an opportunity for learning, isn't it? When we come into those wonderful spaces, it should spark questions of the audience, the people that we're engaging with, the local communities that space should reflect. So let's open the doors. And if we don't feel confident, by the way, you can come and talk to us afterwards at the gem stand, then we're here to help. The guide is there to help you. If you want to talk to people that are doing it, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, I challenge you to take that next step. It's vital. We are living in a society that are separated. We need a society that is inclusive, engaged, and involved. That way, we'll all benefit. Don't you think? Thank you for listening.
You can see why we work with Rob, because he is so inspirational and he gets everybody listening and captivated. And just to touch on that case study you said about Michael's family have been fantastic. They've returned to us again and again. And I think it's the importance of taking the time to get to know families, but also giving them the space that they can return again and again. So not just feeling comfortable with the environment that they're in, but feeling comfortable with the people that they're surrounded. It's investing in their childhood and their experiences and the relationships we form from that. So just to finish up, just a few things really along the way about the programming. So all projects face barriers, and cost is definitely one of them. Not just in terms of museum funding. As I say, we've been very lucky to have funding thrown our way to invest in the Transport Museum, but we are looking at a sustainable programme, and our next steps are to roll out a similar model at the Herbert Art Gallery as well, where we don't have funding dedicated to it. So we're using the knowledge and the skills and the resources that we've built up at the Transport Museum to think about how we can use the resource we've got at the Herbert Art Gallery to create a similar model and open up more opportunities for home educators, but looking and exploring different subject matters. But there's also cost as a barrier for the audience. Home educator families don't receive any funding, they are self-funded, and so it's really thinking about the programme we're offering them, and is it worth them investing in it with their own money? And we found that actually, yes, they do want to invest their money in it because they are willing to invest in their children. And so we have to consider reasonable costing, making it really good value for money, but also that it's accessible pricing as well. Mixed age siblings, we do get families with children of all different ages, so we've purposely planned our home educator programming, the 6-week series, on days where we also have early years activity happening in the museum, so parents feel comfortable of moving between different spaces with different aged children, and we do allow older children to stay with us as leaders of the sessions without parents accompanying them. That comes down to their own independent choices. Some are happy to do so, some less so, but they appreciate that we're flexible in that way. Differing needs and abilities for all of the learners is one of the barriers for families, more so for us, because we've gone into this with our eyes wide open. We've made sure our staff are fully trained up and aware on all the differing needs and abilities of the children. So it's more of a barrier for families, but again, it's about setting those expectations that we are here ready for them and we have dedicated this programme for them. And then staff capacity for effective evaluation. I don't know about you, but this is one thing that we always fail a little bit on because we spend so much of our time focused on the delivery of the programme that gathering appropriate feedback is sometimes more of a challenge. So with this, we've really taken the route of observational feedback. We have done some more formal things of sending out surveys. We've recently held a focus group where we invited families in as well. But again, it's opening up that time within our staff capacity to do so, but really taking the time to harness that observational learning as well. Our top tips from this is just listen to the audience. Honestly, have conversations with the families who you are engaging with for home education. They will guide your programme more than you will guide it yourselves. So respond to their needs and listen to their needs. And then our ambitions, it is around more resources. They would like more online resources so they can continue that learning at home. They want loans kits, whether that's STEM kits or objects that they can take into their own home environment to continue the learning and bridge that gap between what they've experienced at the museum and continue to do at home. So that's where we're going next, to look at how we develop that to expand the home education section further. But we also now have dedicated pages on our website again, so home educators aren't having to trawl through family pages or schools pages. It's really clear on our websites now that home education, we're there for them as their own entity and as their own community. So thank you for listening to me, but there's another fantastic case study to hear now from Tees Valley, so I'm going to introduce Jenny to come up.
Thank you, everyone. Can everyone hear me? It's really weird for this without the headphone in. Thank you very much, and thank you so much, guys, for inviting me to come here and talk this afternoon. I'm from Tees Valley Museums, so we are a consortium of 5 local authority museums from Redcar, Middlesbrough, Stockton, Hartlepool and Darlington. And my role is to to develop creative learning. And when I first started about 18 months ago, one of the first things I did was to go up and meet Morgan Fale up at Tyne Weir Museums or North East Museums as they are now, and listen to the the passion that was there with work with home educated families. And like everybody said before me, it's it's so important to be able to reach those hard to reach audiences, because those people who aren't coming through the doors, we're getting the schools in, but it's a lot harder to get those people with neurodiverse issues, with autism and all those kind of like barriers to kind of like getting into a museum, let alone kind of like participating into an event. So I had the idea of using one of the projects that we have called Literacy Loans. Oh gosh, I forgot that bit. Thank you. Is it on there? Is it coming? Oh, just click. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So Literacy Loans. So this Literacy Loans was actually set up as a schools project. It was set up during COVID. And it was a way of working with schools and getting objects out to schools. So we would take an object out to a classroom, we'd do a Zoom call into the classroom, talking about the object. Then we'd get a published writer to kind of like do some further Zoom calls, either like once a week or every morning in the classroom to develop children's literacy, working alongside what was in the curriculum. And obviously that's not really appropriate for children who were being home educated, but the idea behind it would work really well. So we decided that we would give it a go. And the object that we chose at Preston Park Museum, which is in Stockton, which is an old Victorian building that once belonged to Victorian shipbuilder, the Ropner family, was this peg doll. And this peg doll, because it's a character, could create so many different stories, and we decided that we'd go on to kind of like to work on like literacy and story development. So normally the writer would work along with that side with a school. Oh, yeah, so the first thing that we did was we sent out a survey to all of the home educated families that we knew. We tapped into social media. We kind of like started asking them what they wanted, and actually that was a great start for us because it established contacts, and actually they felt listened to. And you can see here, you know, we've got 66% of participants already registered. 95% of participants were actually interested. And 79% of those had already had access to Teams and Zoom as well, which was absolutely fantastic. So they were already open to new ideas and new suggestions. One of the things that they all stipulated was they wanted small group sizes. That was a really important thing, especially considering the neurodiverse and the issues a lot of these families have. The use of fidget toys, so we were able to kind of like provide everybody with fidget toys on the table when they arrived. They ask for hands-on activities rather than sitting and listening activities. A lot of people requested something for all ages of children, so something was like outcome related rather than kind of like an activity that was relevant for that different age range. They requested a separate like quiet space, which we were able to offer. One actually asked for an adult presence, so they asked if they could come in and enjoy the workshops with their children, and most of them were all accustomed to online learning as well. So we then found an absolutely fantastic writer called Richard O'Neill. He's just been made an MBE. He's wonderful. He's a bit sorry he can't be here today. And he was home educated himself. He's from the traveller community, and he was so he's really in touch. So when we talked about like literacy loans, and I shared my ideas with him, he was like, no, let's strip this right back to like kind of like to the start. He said, like, let's not have these formal plans. Let's not like make anything formal, but let's make everything as open-ended as we possibly can. So that's exactly what we did. So the advantage of Richard Neal as well, obviously, he was with the peg dolls. He was able to bring his own pegs. He had a family member, his mum or his gran had a bag of pegs, and he had pegs throughout the ages. So he really brought like the peg doll to life and the whole story and the history of pegs as well. So he ended up being like even more perfect than I first thought when we first found him. So here he is. There's a picture of Richard. So this is some of the evaluation that we had. The setup that we had was the first session was held at the museum. A lot of the families already knew each other, so it was really nice seeing everybody kind of like walking along the path into the museum, like meeting friends and having that chat and feeling like relaxed before they entered. And then having a little tour of the museum, a little walk around the museum, everything was hands-on. And then at the end of that session, because they couldn't have a peg doll in class, they made a peg doll, they took the peg doll home with them to make. And then following on from that, we had some nice Zoom calls, and Richard was absolutely brilliant because I wanted them to be structured like you would structure them in a school. And he's like, no, let's have these open conversations. So we made settings, we created characters, and we responded to what the children wanted. We responded to kind of what the children said. So when we did when we wanted them to make a character, one child said, I want to make a peg port. It's not a passport, but it's a peg port. And that worked really, really well. So all the children were really engaged with that. And when we made a setting, I imagined that the children would be writing a setting, but like they created a setting, they got the rubbish out of their, like cornflake packets, or some of them got their Lego out, some of them made it out of plasticine and made these settings, and they could talk about them. So it's the oracy and the talking that came first before all the writing, which really surprised me actually. But again, I think if I went back to schools, I think that oracy in schools is also very, very important, isn't it? So we had 3 weekly catch-ups, and then we had a celebration event where the children could share their stories whichever way they wanted at the end of the session. And that was absolutely wonderful again, because they'd got to know each other a little bit more online, those who didn't already know each other. They shared their stories, they'd gained in confidence. Some of them who didn't even want to share at the beginning were happy to share. Some of them brought their stories in on an iPad that they'd filmed themselves and were able to share it in that way if they weren't confident. And whatever barriers were there, Richard was able to kind of like come up with ideas and suggestions as to how to make it accessible for home-educated families. So here are some of the feedback that we've had from those families. And moving forward, we've actually kind of like we would like to repeat this again with one of our partner museums. We've actually set up a whole programme of museum makers across all of our partner museums, delivering once monthly, so that there's something going on at every museum every month for home-educated families. And the other thing that we're going to try and start is to set up a focus group, so we can really listen to what home-educated families want and respond to that with using a focus group. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much, and I'll pass back to Nicky. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jenny, Lisa and Rob. And I hope we're all feeling really inspired and motivated now to think about our own venues, our own museums, our own practice, and what we can start doing to be more accessible for children learning outside of school. I've only got a couple of minutes left, but I just wanted to finish off with some tips about getting started with building this audience. So start small and local, find your local education groups, build trust, show that you're genuinely interested in what they need, that you understand that they'll have different approaches to learning, communicate well, which we've spoken about a lot already. Consult them. Most home educators are really happy to work with you and tell you what they would like and what they need. Collaborate. Can you work with them to create your resources? Spread the word. They are brilliant at spreading the word for you. Ask your local families that you know to do that for you. And use your partnerships. Think about local universities or local industry. Can you help to make some facilities available to families? And finally, there are some national networks that you can tap into, and because home educators do travel a long way for the right session, there's some channels such as Home Education for All on Facebook where you are able to post your offers. So now it's over to you. As we've seen, we've got a growing audience of children and young people learning outside of the school system, and with much potential for us as museums to push the boundaries of our offers. So I really encourage you to take those next steps and go forth and programme. If you want to find out more, there's some links here, and just a massive thank you as well to Jem for collaborating on the toolkits, and for all the professionals and the families that contributed to the research that went into it, and of course to Lisa, Rob and Jenny for sharing their brilliant work with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki. I think we've got time for just one question. So does anyone have a question for either Nikki or any of the other speakers? No, that's absolutely fine.